Well, thank you very much. For all those students that didn't stand when everybody with good grade points was being introduced, there is hope. Because I didn't stand either, but certainly congratulations to all those. In fact, I was lucky to get to Whitewater. I'm hearing impaired. I'm deaf in my right side. I hear a little bit on my left side. If you know the history of someone that can't hear, you fall behind in education because you just miss things. I also had a speech impediment growing up, so school didn't come easy to me. I graduated from high school and I didn't think I'd get to go to any college. And then one of my counselors, Kent Taylor, told me he thought I should go, and he found a school that would accept me, one with a school that would accept someone with maybe not the best grade point, and also hadn't not passed any foreign language courses because I found them extremely difficult with my hearing. And that ended up being University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, which I'm very grateful for. Because if that didn't happen, who knows what would have happened to me and my life and so on. So I'm real grateful for this opportunity. I spoke here in 2006, and a lot has happened since 2006, last time I spoke. It allowed me to be rekindled and re-engaged in the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. It's exciting here to see our Janesville Promise graduates for the first time, our first class. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, my wife and I are now offering a $52,000 prize to open your own business in Janesville, Wisconsin, called the Janesville Business Challenge. And in fact, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater will be judging who will be a winner. So I hope some of you enter and go online to the Janesville Business Challenge. Some other things have happened. My father passed away last year, and I was sitting here thinking about how grateful I am that I went through this graduation. We have 5 children, and one of them didn't go to college, or he did go but didn't graduate. 4 of them did graduate, and only one of them chose to go through this. And you know, you can't make a child go through it, but when I look back, I sure wish they all did, but I'm glad at least one did, so we could have enjoyed the time. My dad went to this graduation 43 years ago, as did my mother. And my dad never went to college. It was one of his goals for us to go to college, but World War II happened. My mother went to college, but my dad always worked 2 jobs, and my mother worked as a teacher's aide for one reason: to put enough money away for us to go to college. So I'm real grateful, and I know the rest of my talk and the rest of the day is going to be all about the graduates. You're going to get great cards, you're going to get great hugs, you're going to be told how wonderful you did, and every word will be meant. But there's also another group of people here that have done great work, that have done a lot of sacrificing, that I think we should thank. So why don't the graduates thank all those in the back that have supported them through this journey to graduation. When I speak, I never want to poke fun at anything, and I apologize to Harvard and Stanford right now for what I'm about to say. But in 2011, we had 13 offers to buy the company I started called the Studer Group, and we whittled it down to just a few. One of them was JMI, and they were the one that were going to pay us the most money. So of course I wanted them to really feel good about what they were buying. So I told them while I was chief executive officer of the company, the president of the company was actually a Stanford graduate, and then he went and got his Harvard MBA. So I leaned over and sort of said, you know, he's a Stanford undergraduate and a Harvard MBA. And they looked at me and said, we lose a lot of money on those guys. I said, I went to Whitewater. And they said, that's why we like it. There's a certain grit that comes to go into a school like Water. A certain thing when you get out, you really want to show that you can do it and you will do it, and absolutely you've got a great foundation. So there's obstacles that we're all going to face, and I guess if there's a few messages I would make is nobody go through life undefeated. Pick something you're passionate about, because you're going to have some things that just don't go your way. I was talking the other day and somebody asked me about jobs, and when they see at a certain level, they just assume everything went smooth, and I told them the jobs I didn't get that I wanted. I remember driving back after being told I didn't get a job, and one time on the phone when the search firm told me for sure I was going to be president of a hospital that I'd interviewed with, and then they called me and said, we just can't believe it because at the board meeting it was tied and it didn't go your way. Well, what happened is I ended up in a place called Pensacola, Florida, that maybe if I didn't get there, I didn't get to start my own job and so on. And when I was 31 years old, I hit another wall, and my life sort of collapsed, and I had to surrender to the fact that I'm an alcoholic. And I've been a recovering alcoholic now since 1982. Once again, I thought that was a tremendous tragedy, but it's one of those things that gave me a rebirth in life and tremendous empathy. So I guess what I'm trying to say is no one's going to go through life undefeated, but we have a chance to always look at an obstacle as an opportunity. We're surrounded by difference makers, and let me tell you about some of my difference makers before I got to Whitewater and Whitewater. Then I'll close with a story. When I went to third grade, I went to Congress Park High School in Brookfield, Illinois, and I was passed on a 6-week trial because, again, I was behind. I couldn't read. I ran into a teacher named Mrs. James. Now, I don't know much about Mrs. James, but I know she brought what every teacher brings. I knew she cared about me, and I knew she loved me. And what she did is she brought the newspaper in because she thought if she could find something I was passionate about, maybe I would learn how to read, and that was the Chicago Tribune sports page. She knew I loved baseball, and I'm lucky enough to own a AA team of the Cincinnati Reds today with golfer Bubba Watson. And it basically started with the fact that she taught me to read by finding things that I would like to read. She also put me in a school play. Now you might wonder, why would a teacher put someone with a speech impediment in a school play? Because she learned the words that I could pronounce, and she wrote a sentence that she knew I could say. And she had I remember my mother sat exactly in the second row in, third seat. And I remember her watching me when I said that line. And I'll never forget the look on her face. See, Mrs. James made a difference in my life. 4th and 5th grade were pretty tough, but then I ran into 6th grade, and Mr. Fry at 7th Avenue School in LaGrange. Now, Mr. Fry, I knew he liked me because the class started, and almost the first day, he moved his desk right next to mine. We co-taught that entire year. I think he figured out that he had a kid that in 4th and 5th grade didn't sit still, bothered the other children, didn't pay attention, so he figured he'd keep me close to him. But he also did something else. He knew I would need extra help because I would be missing some things, and no one wants to feel stupid. No one wants to raise their hand and say, "Can you help me?" sometimes when you already feel like you don't fit in. So what happened there is Mr. Fry helped me through that year. My mother went to the parent-teacher conferences, which always made her nervous, especially after 4th and 5th grade. And she came home and she was so excited because Mr. Fry told her he liked having me in class. In fact, he said he's a bundle of energy. We just got to keep it moving in the right direction. What looks like an obstacle, having a bundle of energy, I find when you get out of school actually is quite helpful when you're an entrepreneur or you're working at accomplishing some things. I went through that with my grandson, Caden. Caden lives in Janesville, and he had a speech impediment just like I did. Couldn't do well in other nursery school because he'd get picked on and he'd hit. And he ended up going to the Talk and Learn at Roosevelt Elementary School in Janesville. My daughter, of course, was terrified because he hadn't had good school experiences. She picked him up one day, and the teacher assistant said to my daughter, "I like having Caden in class." My daughter cried the whole way home. Never underestimate the difference somebody can make. I went to high school, and for those of you that think this is a big group, it is. I went to the biggest high school in Chicago, LaGrange, Illinois, Lyons Township. We had 1,300 people in our graduating class. I wanted to play sports desperately, but something I lack is athletic ability. So I found a sport that was brand new. They didn't cut anybody, and I went out for it, and I ran into a guy named Coach King. Coach King, I remember right off the bat, I wanted to impress him. I'm running for a ball, and I miss it. And all of a sudden I hear, "Good job, way to get over there, nice job." And here I missed the ball. And then he said, "I like the way you hustle, nice job." Coach King got the magic of how to help people, is you talk about what they do well, and then you add the coaching. If he would have just said, "You missed the ball," I might have shut down. I watch a lot of sports, and I can tell who's had a good coach and who hasn't. The people that have had good coaches and good mentors keep going even when they miss the ball because somebody found something right. Well, I had a rough year my junior year in high school. In my senior year, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I got a call before the school year started, and it was from Lee Benesack, and he said, Coach King wants to know why you're not out for soccer. And I said, well, Coach King's the freshman sophomore coach. He said, Coach King's the new varsity coach. He told me to call you. That call changed my life. I went out for soccer. He told me he'd play me half of every game, and he did. And he also told me when I have a study hall to come work in his classroom, which I did. So then I got to come to Whitewater. And when I got to come to Whitewater, after my first year, they asked me what I wanted to major in, and I really didn't know. But I knew that Mrs. James and Mr. Fry and Coach King had a tremendous impact on my life, so I said I want to be a teacher. And then they said, what type of teacher? And I got scared, because I can't spell. In fact, sometimes people email me and I respond right away. It's quint@quintstuder.com, and somebody around the country will say, that's not him. He couldn't have responded that quick. So they say, is it really you? And I said, well, are there some misspelled words? They said, yes. I said, it's me. It's me. So I ended up picking special education, see, because Coach King taught children with special needs, and that's where I met Florence Copas. Florence Copas was the secretary at the College of Education and Special Education, and she just made a kid who didn't know he would make it feel a little bit comfortable, a little bit loved. That's where I met Paul Lauretzin, Dorothy Teedy, Hans Hahn. That's where I met Joseph Pease. I was a safety minor, and these are the people that kept me going. So there were difference makers all along my life, and now I'm going to close with a story, and we'll come right back to it. My daughter got married in June of 1999. Now, she went to Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison. However, she did marry a University of Whitewater grad. So she got married in June of 1999, and I found out there's three things you have to learn when you're the father of a bride. One, you have to be prepared to shell out. Number two, you gotta show up. But probably the third one is the most important thing, you have to shut up. So I was sort of tried talking, and I understood the shut up, and the shell out was going well. I was disappointed for my daughter because she wanted to be married always outside in June, and we should get married in Janesville, Wisconsin on the Rock River, and she wanted to be married in a gazebo. Now, it didn't have a gazebo, so I thought she'd have to be disappointed, which I found out if you're willing to shell out, you can have a gazebo. So the wedding's June 13th, and my wife's already up there, and I'm living in, Pensacola with the family, so I flew up later. And I flew up June 12th, and the rehearsal dinner was at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Janesville, Wisconsin. And so I got there about for rehearsal dinner. And my daughter puts her arm like through my elbow. We're going to practice walking down the aisle. And then she gives me new information. She says, the priest won't let me get married outside unless I'm married inside. So right now, we're really exchanging our vows. Now, about this time, I wanted to ask a question. Because we could save a lot of money here right now. But I sort of remembered the shut up part of this whole deal. And she told me not to say anything. She didn't want to ruin it for everybody else. And we went to rehearsal dinner, went through the Janesville Country Club for like the rehearsal dinner after the rehearsal. And then the next morning, my daughter, who was still upset with her sister, because my daughter was turning 13th on June 13th, so she thought her older sister did this on purpose to take away her, thing about celebration of her birthday, 13 on 13. But so they went to where they were getting married, and about 1 o'clock, I was supposed to show up with my youngest son. Now, we got up a little early, and we went and got our tuxes in Janesville at a rental place, and I got measured on Pace Avenue in Pensacola. They measured me. If they would have came in and said, what color is it, I would have known. What style did you know? I don't know. The only thing I got to pick out was my t-shirt, my underwear, and my socks. Now, I felt like a real wimp for many years, but I told this story, and one time afterwards, a guy came up to me. I mean, he stood and just looked at me like with adulation. And he said, you got to pick out your own socks? So anyway, we get to where the wedding's at. And, they do a lot of pictures early on, and the wedding's at 3, so we got a lot of time. There's 300 chairs, there's a gazebo, and all of a sudden a guy shows up with a cage with a couple birds. Now, I'm looking for something to do to show my value, so I assume that he shouldn't be at this wedding. So I go up to my daughter, and I said, there's a guy with some birds here. Would you like me to ask him to leave? And she goes, oh, no, the doves have arrived. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Why would you want birds that look like pigeons to fly over you when you're dressed nice? So I'm very suspicious because I can be skeptical at times. So I go up to this guy and I say, when do you let these birds out? He said, well, when the minister says, now I give you Mr. and Mrs., I'll let them out. They'll take 2 flights overhead and then they'll land. Now, we're paying this guy. And if we're paying somebody, I want to make sure they're doing their job. So the whole entire service, I'm just waiting for that guy to say, now I give you Mr. and Mrs. And sure enough, he says it. I never saw my daughter turn around. I'm like a duck hunter in a blind waiting for those babies. They fly 2 coop swoops and they go down. Well, now the wedding has started. And I've walked my daughter down. I'm sitting here, my wife is sitting there, and everybody's up at the gazebo, and this thing's moving along. By the way, it was a little confusing because the priest that married him inside wouldn't marry him outside, so he had to get like a renegade priest from Woodstock, Illinois, to come up to Janesville, and he's doing a whole nother script, so I'm listening for now I give you Mr. and Mrs., and all of a sudden there's a boat coming down the Rock River. And there's a boat, and of course, if you've been to one of these things, you're like acting like you're looking at the gazebo, but you're sort of watching this boat. Now, these guys, they're in their 20s, I'd say, have some options. They can either say, oh my gosh, a wedding, let's turn around and go back, we'll come by later. They could say, let's put it in Troll and go on the other side of the Rock River. Or they could do the third option, is which these guys selected. Let's just do some 360s in the river right now. So they're doing these 360s, and I'm looking at this, and all of a sudden the boat stops, and a guy gets up, and though he doesn't know the groom, they're bonding, they're men, they're about the same age, and he says, hey, it's not too late. We'll pick you up at the pier. And I'm thinking it is too late. He got married last night. So I'm sitting here. I got doves in the back. I got a gazebo up ahead of me. I got a renegade priest doing the vows. I got a daughter that got married the night before, and I got a guy yelling from a boat. Now, I hope nobody takes this wrong, but when I went to Whitewater, it was the 60s and the 70s. I'm sitting here thinking, could I be having a drug flashback at my daughter's own wedding? I'm having an out-of-body experience here. So all of a sudden, the priest, I think he's going to say, now I give you Mr. and Mrs., and all of a sudden he says, if you throw a pebble in the pond, how much water does it impact? I'm thinking, who cares? Just like some of you might be saying that right now. And then he walks out into the crowd. I'm not paying any attention to this guy because I'm so afraid he's going to say, father of the groom, when you throw a pebble in a pond, how much water does it impact? Now I'm literally trying to think of the answer to this. I'm thinking I should have paid closer attention. Did he say how big the pebble was? How deep is this pond anyway? And he gets back up and he says, if you throw a pebble in a pond, it impacts every bit of water in this pond. See, I would have missed that question, because sometimes I'm skeptical. Herbert Spencer says the sure way to keep ourselves in the darkness is to have contempt prior to investigation. And sometimes I come to a conclusion before I've even done the investigation or the assessment. Well, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And then he explained why he mentioned that story. He said, you might be at this wedding and don't know the bride and groom very well, and you might not think that you have a big impact on this bride and groom, but if you're at this wedding, you've impacted them. Whether you're impacted one of their friends, whether you're here for another reason, never underestimate the impact we have on somebody's life. Now, I had spoken for 4 or 5 years out publicly before 1999, but I had never thought of Mrs. James. I never thought of Mr. Fry. I never thought of Coach King. I never thought of Florence Copas, and I never thought about all those professors at Whitewater. But see, they're all pebbles on my pond. So some of you have already made a difference, and you will make a difference. Some of you have made a difference, and you think nobody notices, but they have. People ask me all the time, have you thanked those teachers? I thanked Mrs. Copas. I didn't thank Mrs. James or Mr. Fry, never found them. I did thank Coach King. Years ago, I was speaking in Asheville, and an organization said, make sure you talk about Coach King a little bit, will you? And I talked about Coach King, and when I talked about Coach King, they had flown him in, and he walked out on stage. See, we're all difference makers. We've already made a big difference. You parents and family members, you've thrown a pebble in the pond, and you've got all these people right up here that you've impacted. All of you graduates, you've already made an impact that you probably don't even recognize, but someone will talk about the difference you made as their classmate. All these faculty members have made a difference. So don't underestimate the difference you have made. Don't underestimate the difference you can make. And please, don't underestimate the difference you will make. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you very much, Quinn. It is always a very special time when you're back on campus.